My name is Linda Green. I am the director here at the museum, and I'm thrilled to see you all here. I'm sorry for the rain, but I love having you in the museum, so it's all working out good, so thank you. Today we have a special event. Local artist and firefighter Dave Christiana has created yet another amazing monument for the town of Westford. And this one is in honor of Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe was here in Westford, and we'll go into that in just a little bit here. The poem, Annie, was written from a woman who went to Westford Academy and grew up here in Westford. So, of course, events like this would not be possible without Westford Remembers. We are partnering with the Parish Center of the Arts and the Westford Historical Society to bring you this event today. So, Edgar Allan Poe, affectionately called Nancy Hayward Richmond Annie. And it was believed that after he started calling her Annie, that she never answered to any other name. So we will refer to Nancy in this next write-up here as Annie. And Annie was actually featured as a Westford Notable of the Month through the Westford Historical Society, and we do feature a Westford Notable every month on our website, so check it out. And this article was written by James Van Beaver, and he is a Westford Historical Society researcher and volunteer. So I'm going to read you the article that he wrote now. So, Edgar Allan Poe not only loved Annie Richmond, but he also loved the town of Westford. Poe said of the town, I spend many hours here, sitting by the fire at twilight, and often walking up Prospect Hill. There is no place on earth or in heaven where I feel such a peace as here. The poet loved to wander the hills and valleys of Westford and felt that the town was his sanctuary. Poe went on to say that when he climbed the top of Prospect Hill on a glorious Indian summer day, I think we just had one of those, you can imagine that fully, he said it could be paradise beyond his wildest hopes. It was in October of 1848 that Mr. Poe made his first visit to Westford. Annie's brother, Amos Barwell Hayward, had invited the poet to spend some time in his hometown. Barwell at the time was the principal of the Franklin Grammar School in Lowell, but he was still living with his parents, Amos and Lydia, and his sister Sarah in their home on Graniteville Road. During Edgar Allan Poe's first visit to Westford, he participated in a reading circle conducted by the Hayward family. The Haywards were a very literary family and were interested in Mr. Poe's works. At the Hayward home, the writer read a number of his works, including The Raven, The Bell, and several others. It was during this time, or during this meeting at the Hayward home, that the poet became involved in a debate with the Reverend George B. Willard, who was the 26-year-old pastor of the First Parish Church of Westford. Willard was a Brown University graduate, described by historians as an eccentric preacher. Barwell would later comment that it was a treat to witness the debate between Poe and Willard, and he suggested that the young clergyman had found himself up against an antagonist as one he had never yet met. In May of 1848, the famous Goth writer spent 3 more days in Westford, again staying in the Hayward home on Graniteville Road. It was during this time that Poe might have been gathering the background for his short story, Lander Cottage. It is evident, since the way that Poe describes the landscape, in Lander Cottage, and it resembles the hills and valleys of Westford. On Edgar Allan Poe's last day in Westford, the poet walked Sarah Hayward to her classes at Westford Academy, which is the building you're now sitting in. The walk from the Hayward home to the Academy could not have been more than 10 minutes, but the memory of their parting and goodbyes would remain with Sarah through the remainder of her life. Prior to Poe's death, he contemplated building a cottage in Westford and moving to the town. He wanted to be close to the Haywards. The idea was to move to Westford along with his mother-in-law, Maria Clem, the mother of his deceased wife, to whom he was very close. Poe felt that Westford might be a paradise within him. Sadly, Poe's dream of moving to a small cottage in Westford never happened. On October 7th of 1949, he died shortly after collapsing in a tavern in Baltimore, Maryland. Poe was 40 years old at the time of his death. Later in life, Annie Richmond became involved in civic affairs in the city of Lowell. She was the founder and president of the Young Women's and Children's, the home of the Young Women's and Children's Home. Richmond would also become one of the founders of Lowell General Hospital and became associated with the women's rights leaders such as Lucy Stone and Mary A. Livermore. Annie Richmond died in February of 1898. At her gravesite in Lowell Cemetery, the name Annie appears on her tombstone, and her name and memory will live on in the history of American literature. So today we thank David Christiana, and we remember and celebrate the time that the legendary poet spent here in Westford.
Linda told you kind of the history. I grew up in Westford. I love history, and there are certain things that capture my attention and get me interested in history. And Westford's full of a lot of old houses, a lot of things, and Linda and I have talked about this before. But people driving through the town, it's like driving through any other town. There are a lot of old houses in New England. But I want people to be able to see certain things about our history that kind of grabs them and brings them into the town or stop to look at something. And actually capture different aspects of Westford that are different from other towns. And this is one of those things. I remember, just like the Westford night, riding up as a child to go to the nursing home to visit my sister when she worked there. I would stop at the night because it's a great spot, because that hill is a killer. But I didn't know really what it was. And I didn't realize, years later, I would kind of explain it better and do a monument there in regards to that. Same with the pub. There's a marker down the street on Granville Road that marks the house. It's a really nice, great granite slab, and I'm glad Brad Parker, who put it there, did it, because it caught my attention. But it was generic. Poe is here from this date to this date. I forget what the words are, but he loved Westford, walked Westford, read poetry, lived life. And to me, that's too generic for me. This is Edgar Allan Poe. We need a little more than that. So I was asked to contribute something to the PCA years ago, the Parish Center for the Arts, but all my stuff's kind of big and I can't really do a gathering thing. So this was an opportunity not only to show a little bit about Westford history that captured me and got me even more interested at living here, but sharing some of my artwork to the PCA. Out of all the Poe sculptures out there, this is probably going to be the most subtle, the most simple, but I think once you see it, I think once you look at the whole idea of it, it may be a little more complex, so you're going to give it a chance. As with most stuff I do, it looks kind of simple, but then you really got to look at it, and it's a little more than that. I wanted to capture Poe himself, I got really involved reading all the letters that Poe would write with Annie and other family members to Poe. And it really showed a side of Poe that you don't always see in his writing. And so I wanted to capture his words from those letters and transcribe them into the sculpture that's there. I also wanted to show that, well, you'll see. I will say this, I'm going to forewarn you, the whole sculpture isn't done because just like anything in Poe's life, disasters happen. And a deadline was not met, and I'm not happy about it, but we'll work through it, and we kind of came up with a compromise. So you will see the full sculpture, just part of it is wax, and you'll see.
Oh, okay.
So it's a wax copy, not the best wax copy. I kind of doctored it up a little bit, but the bronze I think is going to look amazing. And I'll tell you more about it out there when you see it. There are certain things I wanted to do, but you need to look at it to see what I was trying to capture. So.
Right. So now we're going to hear from Rick Taylor. Rick is a fabulous storyteller, a great friend, and he's going to share with us one of Eddie and Annie's letters.
Folks, this extraordinary letter was written 2 weeks after Poe's visit to Westford in October 1848. And here's what's going on in the letter. Annie has made Eddie promise 2 things. Number 1, that he would stop drinking, and how's that going? And number 2, that he would follow through on his plans to go back down to Providence, Rhode Island and propose marriage to a woman that he is interested in down there. And I will let Eddie's own words tell you what happened with that. Fordham, November 16th, 1848. Annie. Annie, my Annie, what cruel thoughts about your Eddie must have been torturing your heart during the last terrible fortnight in which you have heard nothing from me, not even one little word to say that I still lived and loved you. But Annie, I know that you felt too deeply the nature of my love for you to doubt that, even for one moment. And this thought has comforted me in my bitter sorrow. I could bear that you should imagine every other evil except that one, that my soul had been untrue to yours. Why am I not with you now, darling, that I might sit by your side, press your dear hand in mine, and look deep down into the clear heaven of your eyes, so that the words which I now can only write might sink into your heart and make you comprehend what it is that I would say. And yet, Annie, all that I wish to say, all that my soul pines to express at this instant is included in the one word, love. To be with you now so that I might whisper in your ear the divine emotions which agitate me, I would willingly, oh joyfully abandon this world and all my hopes of another. But you believe this, Annie. You do believe it and will always believe it. So long as I think that you know I love you as no man ever loved woman. So long as I think you comprehend in some measure the fervor with which I adore you, so long no worldly trouble can ever render me absolutely wretched. But oh, my darling, my Annie, my own sweet sister Annie, my pure, beautiful angel, wife of my soul, to be mine hereafter and forever in the heavens. How shall I explain to you the bitter, bitter anguish which has tortured me since I left you? You saw, You felt the agony of grief with which I bade you farewell. You remember my expressions of gloom, of a dreadful, horrible foreboding of ill. Indeed, it seems to me that death approached me even then, and that I was involved in the shadow which went before him. As I clasped you to my heart, I said to myself, it is for the last time until we meet in heaven. I remember nothing distinctly from that moment until I found myself in Providence. I went to bed and wept through a long, hideous night of despair. When the day broke, I arose and endeavored to quiet my mind by a rapid walk in the cool, keen air, but all would not do. The demon tormented me still. Finally, I procured 2 ounces of laudanum, and without returning to my hotel, took the cars back to Boston. When I arrived, I wrote you a letter in which I opened my whole heart to you, my Annie, whom I so madly, so distractedly love. I told you how my struggles were more than I could bear, how my soul revolted from saying the words which were to be said, and that not even for your dear sake could I bring myself to say them. I then reminded you of that holy promise which was the last that I exacted from you in parting. The promise that under all circumstances you would come to me on my bed of death. I implored you to come then, mentioning the place where I should be found in Boston. Having written this letter, I swallowed about half the laudanum and hurried to the post office, intending not to take the rest until I saw you, for I did not doubt for one moment that my own Annie would keep her sacred promise. But I had not calculated on the strength of the laudanum, for before I reached the post office, my reason was entirely gone, and the letter was never put in. Let me pass over, my darling sister, the awful horrors which succeeded. A friend was at hand who aided and, if it can be called saving, saved me. But it is only within the last 3 days that I have been able to remember what occurred in that dreary interval. It appears that after the laudanum was rejected from the stomach, I became calm and, to a casual observer, sane, so that I was suffered to go back to Providence. And here I saw her and spoke for your sake the words which you urged me to speak. Ah, Annie, Annie, my Annie, is your heart so strong? Is there no hope? Is there none? I feel that I must die if I persist, and yet how can I now retract with honor? Ah, beloved, think for me and for yourself. Do I not love you, Annie? Do you not love me? Is not this all? Beyond this blissful thought, what other consideration can there be in this dreary world? It is not much that I ask, sweet sister Annie. My mother and myself would take a small cottage at Westford, oh, so small, so very humble. I should be far away from the tumults of the world, from the ambition which I loathe. I would labor day and night, and with industry I would accomplish so much, Annie. It would be a paradise beyond my wildest dreams. I could see some of your beloved family every day, and you often, oh, so often. I would hear from you continually, regularly, and our dear mother would be with us and love us both. Darling, do these pictures not touch your inmost heart? think. Oh, think for me, before the words, the vows are spoken, which would put yet another bar between us. Before the time goes by beyond which there must be no thinking, I call upon you in the name of God, in the name of the holy love I bear you, to be sincere with me. Can you, Annie, bear to think that I am another's? It would give me supreme, infinite bliss to hear you say that you could not bear it. I am at home now with my dear Muddy, who is endeavoring to comfort me, but the sole words which soothe me are those in which she speaks of my Annie. She tells me that she has written you, begging you to come on to Fordham. Beloved Annie, is it not possible? I am so ill, so terribly, hopelessly ill in body and mind, that I feel I cannot live unless I can feel your sweet, gentle, loving hand pressed against my forehead. Oh, my pure, virtuous, generous, beautiful, beautiful sister Annie, is it not possible for you to come, if only for one little week, until I subdue this fearful agitation, which, if continued, would either destroy my life or drive me hopelessly mad? Farewell, here and hereafter, forever your own, Eddie.
All right, so my name is J.W. Oker. I am not from Westford. I'm also not from Massachusetts, nor New England. I live in New Hampshire. So why am I here tonight? I'm here because you're doing something cool that's Poe-related. But in 2015, as preparation for a book I was writing called Poe Land, The Hallowed Haunts of Edgar Allan Poe, I visited all 7 states relevant to Edgar Allan Poe. That's Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, New York, Maryland, which is where I'm actually from, South Carolina, and I'm missing one in there. But also London. Also went across the ocean to London. And the whole point of the book was I wanted to visit every part of Edgar Allan Poe that still existed. So that includes private collections. I get to hold in my hands locks of his hair, pieces of his coffin, his wedding ring, letters from him to Washington Irving and other notables. I got to see sites that were, hallowed, just preserved because Poe lived there. Houses in the Bronx, houses in Baltimore, his wedding suite in Petersburg, Virginia. I infiltrated that as well. And monuments, plaques and statues, and all kinds of honorariums to this strange, strange character that's Edgar Allan Poe. One of the most, important figures in not just American literature, but world literature, right? He invented the detective story. He evolved the science fiction story. He's one of the foundational bedrock authors of horror. He evolved the meta story, the hoax story. He was a poet, he was a critic. And he was all of these things. Also, people don't know this, but he's also a comedy writer. Most of his stuff was comedy, actually. And he did all these things in 40 short years. In a life of abject poverty. There were times he couldn't even leave his house because he didn't have shoes. And, a life full of trouble, orphaned at age 2, foster parents that never fully adopted him and also rejected him in the end. His wife died. He could never keep a job for very long. He had to move out. That's why I had to go to 7 different states, because he kept having to move to find just the sustenance to make ends meet. And everywhere he's been, there's been this group of people, artists and aficionados and appreciators who honor it. Again, those sites are preserved because people did it. Those monuments are there because people wanted it, because they built it. And he's worth it. Edgar Allan Poe is worth it. Now, why do it in Westford, right? You guys have already heard the story of the factual why of Westford. There's no reason Poe doesn't need another monument, technically, right? Poe's fine. He's in his home in Baltimore. He's done a lot of stuff. You're doing this not for Poe, you're doing this for Westford, right? David hit on it exactly. It's one of my entire reasons for existence as well is I've been to 49 out of 50 states, I've been to over a dozen countries. I'm a travel writer, so I try to find unique stuff to write about. And every town, especially in America, is basically the same. At least the way they present themselves is the same. They're not the same. The way they present themselves is the same, right? They often really hit on their geography, right? That's one of their, if they're not close to a sports team, that's where they get their identity from. then they harp on their geography, right? Come see our farmland, our hills, our mountains, our coastline, our lakes, our ponds, our forests, our valleys. Everybody kind of has it. They're great, they're important, but everybody kind of has those. Or they lean on their history, right? And in general, our histories are pretty similar, especially if you're in New England, right? We've got colonialism, revolutionaryism, we've got world wars. Every town has that World War statue in the little town that we've all seen a million times. And all those things are important. I don't want to be too snotty about things. Those are important, but they're just not unique, right? And being a town that's so important to one of the most important figures of art, that's unique, that's important. That's something that will really bring out the specialness of Westford. And I'll close by saying this. So I'm one of David's use cases, right? So I'm from Maryland. I grew up in Maryland. I moved to New England probably 15 years ago, but I'd never heard of Westford my entire life. I didn't know what Westford was. Even though now I live 30 minutes away, I still didn't know what Westford was. First time I came to Westford, Westford Night. I'd heard about this random thing in the middle of the sidewalk in town, so I came for Westford Night. I came for Brad's Poe monument. I came, that was part of my book project. Actually, I visited way before the book project, because I'm a fan of Poe, but I visited for the book project as well. I bring people to it all the time, and you guys upgraded the monument with the Westford Night with Dave's statue. I came for that. I didn't, not for the dedication, but I came to see it. I'm always bringing people to Westford because of that. You guys have interesting things. Poe, you have Westford Night, you have a high school whose mascot is a ghost. That's like, nobody has knights and hawks and those kinds of things, right? So, I think, I like what David said, because again, that's the reason why I know about Westford. That's the reason why I've been to Westford so many times. I'm still coming to Westford. I always bring people to see the Post stuff. I always bring people to see the Westford Night. So, you guys are doing a great thing. I mostly just wanted to be up here so I could be part of history. I've seen so many monuments to Poe, 100 years after they were erected. And here, we all can be part of history now by being the day it's shown, even though it's partial. That means you have to come back again, I guess.
You have to come back again.
Exactly, right. So we're here at history, right? In 100 years, this thing will still be around, and people will be visiting it. And I know this because I've been to those monuments. I've been to those monuments that have been around for 100, 150 years. And are just part of this continuum of Poe artifacts that will never die. Poe is just eternal, right? He's not just a piece of history, he's a piece of pop culture. I just went to Joann's, right, for Halloween season. They've got decorations in Poe's face. So this is an artist that will be around as long as any artist can be. And as long as he is, Westford will be a part of that story, and Westford will live on as well. So I just want to say, most of all, just congratulations, Westford, on doing this. I think you're doing a great thing, and you have something really special with this monument. Thank you.
As we learned earlier this afternoon, The Raven is one of the poems that we know Edgar Allan Poe performed here in Westford about 175 years ago, maybe even today. It's arguably the poem that made him famous, although it certainly didn't make him rich. I think he got like $9 for it. And I don't ordinarily talk about what a poem is about before I recite it, but I feel like this particular poem is so familiar to so many people that maybe if I go ahead and do that, it might give you something new to listen for. So I wrote down a few notes. First of all, this is the usual interpretation. Ravens have long been seen as harbingers of death. And this poem was published in 1845. At the time, Poe's wife was slowly dying of tuberculosis, and she finally succumbed in January of 1847. So that's one way to read it. Another one is that ravens have also been associated with knowledge and wisdom. So it could be that the narrator of the poem, in seeing this symbol of knowledge and wisdom on the wing, so to speak, is afraid that his sanity might be flying away at any moment. But this third one is, I just learned about this a week or so ago, so this is the one I really wanted to share with you. In the ancient world, ravens were viewed as symbols of hope. As a matter of fact, that sound a raven makes, somebody make the raven sound. Exactly. We say caw, but that sound in ancient Greek, or in Greek, actually sounds an awful lot like the Greek word for hope. For the Greek word for tomorrow. So, and Poe would have known that because he's a student of classical literature, that in some of the classical works, the word that we say ka is transcribed as tomorrow. And yet it's the exact opposite of what the bird in the poem says. So just something to think about. Here's Poe's The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this, and nothing more. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow. Vainly I had sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here forevermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger. Hesitating then no longer, "Sir," said I, or "Madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into the darkness peering, long I stood there, wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token, and the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore." This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore." Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind, and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. "Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou," I said, "art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's Plutonian shore." Quoth the raven, "Nevermore." Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little meaning, little relevancy bore, for we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing bird above his chamber door, bird or beast, upon the sculptured bust above his chamber door with such name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me, as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store. Caught from some unhappy master, whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster, till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of never, nevermore. But the raven, still beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of yore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet violet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press nevermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent thee, by his angels he hath sent thee respite, respite and nepenthe from thy memory of Lenore. Quaff, oh quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore. Desolate yet all undaunted, on this home by horror haunted, on this desert land enchanted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aidenn it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Clasp a rare and radiant maiden, whom the angels name Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign of parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting. Get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no dark plume as a token of that lie thy soul hath spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beat from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven never flitted, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door, and his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. and my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore. Never done better, that one. But, one of the best winter Halloween. It takes place in December, but one of the best Halloween poems ever written. This next poem is called For Annie, and I think this time I'll just launch into it. If you have any questions, we can talk about it afterwards. But you heard the letter that he wrote to For Annie, so draw your own conclusions. Thank heaven, the crisis, the danger is past, and the lingering illness is over at last, and the fever called living is conquered at last. Sadly, I know I am shorn of my strength, and no muscle I move as I lie at full length, but no matter. I feel I am better at length. And I rest so composedly now in my bed that any beholder might fancy me dead, might start at beholding me, thinking me dead. The moaning and groaning, the sighing and sobbing are quieted now with that horrible throbbing at heart. Ah, that horrible, horrible throb. The sickness, the nausea, the pitiless pain had ceased with that fever that maddened my brain, with the fever called living that burned in my brain. And oh, of all tortures, that torture, the worst, has abated. That terrible torture of thirst for the naphthaline river of passion accursed. I have drank of a water that quenches all thirst, of a river, of a water that flows with a lullaby sound from a spring not so very far down underground, from a cavern not very far down underground. And let it never be foolishly said that my room it is gloomy and narrow my bed, for man never slept in a different bed, and to sleep you must slumber in just such a bed. My tantalized spirit here blandly reposes, forgetting or never regretting its roses, its old agitations of myrtle and roses. For now, while so quietly lying, it fancies a holier odor about it, of pansies, a rosemary odor commingled with pansies, with rue and the beautiful Puritan pansies. And so it lies happily, bathing in many a dream of the truth and the beauty of Annie, drowned in a bath of the tresses of Annie. She tenderly kissed me, she fondly caressed, and then I fell gently to sleep on her breast, deeply to sleep from the heaven of her breast. When the light was extinguished, she covered me warm, and she prayed to the angels to keep me from harm, to the queen of the angels to shield me from harm. And I lie so composedly now in my bed, knowing her love, that you fancy me dead. And I rest so contentedly now in my bed, with her love at my breast, that you fancy me dead, that you shudder to look at me, thinking me dead. But my heart, it is brighter than all of the many stars in the sky, for it sparkles with Annie. It glows with the light of the love of my Annie, with the thought of the light of the eyes of my Annie. Anybody Anybody want to take a stab at what that poem's about? Annie had made Edgar Allan Poe promise two things: that he would stop drinking and that he would go ahead and propose to this woman down in Providence. He, in turn, made her promise that she would visit him on his deathbed. And so I'm fairly confident in saying that this is his vision of lying on his deathbed. He may be alive at this point, he may not be alive, but the connection there seems pretty clear to me. It's always dangerous to get the narrator of a poem confused with the author, but in this case, I'm going to go there.